Hi, I'm Johnny from Ultimate Paper Mache, and today I have a Highland cow. I thought this would be an awful lot of fun to do, mostly because this cow has the same hairdo as my Charlie. It was supposed to be a tutorial on how to do one of those faux taxidermy mounts. And it is not going to be a tutorial because I tried so many different things and just kept messing around until I finally got something that I liked. So let's say this is going to be just for inspiration. If you're working on a project and it doesn't seem to be coming out quite the way you wanted it to, then just try something else. Maybe try 4 or 5 things like I had to do with this guy, and eventually you might come up with something that you actually think is working. Eventually I did come up with something that I liked. I really liked this cow. It was kind of touch and go though all the way along, and there was a whole lot of times during this process that I was almost convinced that it couldn't possibly work. But in the end, I think she's worthy of a spot on my wall. so let me show you how this was done.
The first thing I did was to make a cardboard pattern using some drawings and some books that I have on my shelf, and a whole lot of photographs that I found online of Highland cows doing a Google image search. I cut out the drawing that I made on a piece of cardboard and then attached that to a hard piece of I think it was just leftover drywall. It just gave me something to actually attach it to. And at that point I was able to start filling in the spaces with some crumpled paper and foil. So far so good. This is how I make most of my sculptures in masks. So as far as that goes, I would highly recommend that you use a pattern on the inside and then go ahead and fill in the armature in any way you like. Just as soon as the paper was all filled in though, that's when I made my first mistake. I had used some cheap plastilina on some previous masks and it worked really well, but it turns out that the reason it worked is because I was using a really hard armature. It was a resin skull actually that I had. There was plenty of things to push against, and so I was able to use the plastilina reasonably well. It's cheap and so it isn't the best material, but it worked. It does not work at all when you have a soft, squishy armature like this. This actually took several days. If I did this over, and if I did want to use the shop towels and fast setting paste like I intended to use on the cow, I would use a soft modeling clay that works a whole lot better than this plastilina. If I was going to go ahead and use the plaster of Paris, the plaster cloth like I ended up using just out of frustration, I would use some wet clay, just some pottery clay. You can't use the wet clay with paper mache because it keeps the paper mache from drying, but it works just fine with the plaster of Paris. So you have a lot of options. The third option would be to skip the clay completely, and just as soon as you have the crumpled paper and masking tape armature done, go directly to building, to mixing up a batch of the paper mache clay and do all of your modeling and the paper mache all in one go. I would have gotten this cow done days earlier if I had chosen to do that instead. The clay really did take way too long, and so I wanted something to cover it that would go fast, and we're right in the middle of a polar vortex, so I did not want to go to the store and get some blue shop towels like I had intended to do. So I did cover it with the plaster cloth, just 2 layers of plaster cloth, let it dry for 10 to 20 minutes, and then took all the armature from out of the inside of the head. Before I could start putting the paper mache on though, I needed to get some horns on the cow, and I used a piece of heavy wire and wrapped it really tightly with some aluminum foil. I used more plaster cloth to attach the horns to the head, and then I could start on the brown paper. The paper came from a package. Actually, it was the package that the plaster cloth came in from Brick in the Yard. I used that for the entire surface except for the nose. But once I had the brown paper on there, I realized that the horns had been attached way too high. So I had to get out a box cutter, cut them off, attach them back again with some more plaster cloth. That was another thing that I do not recommend that you do, but it does work. If you don't mind cutting things apart and putting it back together, it works just fine. Before I put the hair on, though, I wanted to get the rest of the head done, so I made black eyes with acrylic paint and then glued on some brown tissue paper. I didn't cut it. I waited until the tissue paper was dry and then cut it out. It seemed to work really well. And I thought I wanted a orange nose because a lot of the Highland cows have nice pinkish noses. That didn't work at all. The problem with it was that the pink tissue paper, when it was overlapped, it made really weird blotches. I really hated it. I ended up using brown tissue paper, and that worked really well. Brown on the outside, then there's an area right in the middle that is black tissue paper and a little bit of pink around the edges, and I think this ended up working a lot better. I wound some white paper towels around the horns, and I think that worked really well. They're not nice and slick and smooth like horns, but at least they're the right color. And then I sealed the entire head with some clear varnish mixed with a little bit of burnt umber so that it would be completely sealed before the hair went on. Since I really didn't want to go to the store to buy anything for hair, I tried 3 or 4 different things trying to find a way to make some hair out of something that I already had in the house. None of them worked until I found some yarn downstairs in my coat closet. Why it was there, I don't know. Why I bought it, I don't know. But it was the right color, and it wasn't really wound very tightly. It just had to, I cut it into strips and then used a dog brush to fuzz it out a little bit, and it worked actually quite well. I used a hot glue gun to get the hair on there, and that was not easy because every time you tried to push the hair into the hot glue with whatever tool you were using, the little fuzzy bits on the hair would stick to the tool. I mean, it stuck to the hot glue gun. I mean, it was just a mess. I finally figured out that if I used a strip of the brown paper that I had used for the final finish on the head, and then pressed against that with my tool, I could actually get it to work. And the other hair, it was going to be folded over this part so that the glue would all be on the inside. So that meant that the brown paper wouldn't show either, and that worked out just fine. I combed the hair with my fingers so that it would look a little bit organized, and then I sprayed it with some clear kryolan varnish to keep those fuzzy bits from just falling out and ending up on the floor. It's kind of like hairspray, I suppose.
So that's how this was done, and I do want to remind you that I could not have done this without these 3 books. I've had these for years, and I use them all the time. They've got a lot of different animals in here. Atlas of Animal Anatomy, Ken Holtgren's, this is hard, The Art of Animal Drawing, and, I need more hands, Drawing Animals by Norman Adams. If you haven't got a copy of these, I think probably most of them are out of print, but they're still available on Amazon.com, or you may be able to find them in your local library, and it's just a really huge help. There's things that you can find, shapes that are really clear and obvious in these drawings that you simply can't see on a 2-dimensional photograph. So I highly recommend these, especially if you're doing something that is really unfamiliar to you, like this cow was. I know absolutely nothing about cows, but she still looks like a cow. She turned out really good. So thanks for watching. If you have anything that you'd like to show off, please come and visit me, ultimatepapermache.com.